Wootton High School had always been known as one of the safest schools in Montgomery County, Maryland, a place where parents felt comfortable dropping off their children without a second thought, where teachers believed discipline and strong academic focus created a protective environment against violence, and where students moved through bright hallways filled with college banners and championship trophies, never imagining that one ordinary weekday morning would fracture that sense of security forever. As the first warning signs came quietly when a sharp echo cut through the science wing, a sound many initially mistook for a dropped lab tray or construction noise until the second crack followed, louder and unmistakable, sending waves of confusion through classrooms, while a teacher in the hallway froze, eyes widening as she saw a student collapse near a locker, crimson spreading across the polished floor, while terrified teenagers screamed and scrambled for cover, triggering an immediate lockdown as automated announcements ordered students and staff to secure their rooms, barricade doors, and remain silent. While outside the building, school resource officers and local law enforcement converged within minutes, forming a perimeter as helicopters circled overhead, and inside one classroom, a history teacher pressed students against the far wall while whispering reassurances. She barely believed herself, her hands shaking as she texted administrators confirming she heard gunfire. While across the building, the suspected shooter, later identified as a 17-year-old student who had reportedly been struggling with isolation and disciplinary conflicts, moved through the hallway in visible panic rather than calculated aggression, dropping the weapon near the stairwell as officers stormed the corridor and ordered him to the ground, taking him into custody without further violence, while paramedics rushed to reach the wounded victim. Another student, whose identity remained temporarily withheld, whose classmates would later describe him as quiet but kind, someone who helped others with homework and stayed late for robotics club. As investigators quickly began assembling the timeline, uncovering disturbing details that revealed the shooting was not random but stemmed from an escalating conflict that had drawn administrative attention weeks earlier, yet had been quietly handled through internal disciplinary meetings rather than external intervention, creating the first layer of dramatic irony because the very system designed to prevent escalation had unintentionally concealed warning signs that might have triggered stronger mental health or security responses, while parents gathered beyond police tape, many collapsing into tears as they texted their children and waited for confirmation they were safe. While inside the command center, administrators realized the power structure of control had shifted instantly from educational authority to law enforcement command, with detectives now dictating building access, evidence collection, and student interviews, leaving school officials forced into reactive roles as the community demanded answers about how safety assurances had dissolved in seconds, while students later recounted how drills they once treated as routine suddenly became real survival strategies, describing the haunting silence of locked classrooms, the quiet sobs of friends clutching phones, and the overwhelming realization that violence had entered a space they associated with opportunity and growth. While investigators discovered messages and social media posts suggesting the suspect had expressed feelings of invisibility and resentment, yet classmates admitted they noticed his distress but believed adults were already handling it, deepening the tragic irony that nearly everyone assumed someone else held the responsibility to intervene, while the wounded student was rushed into emergency surgery, his condition becoming the emotional focal point for a community suspended between hope and grief, as detectives worked rapidly to confirm no accomplices existed and no further threat remained, eventually presenting evidence that solidified charges against the suspect, whose arrest brought a complicated sense of relief and sorrow. Relief that the violence had stopped, and sorrow that it began within their own student body, while the major power shift continued unfolding beyond the investigation, as parents, advocacy groups, and student leaders demanded expanded mental health programs, anonymous reporting systems, and transparent threat assessment protocols, forcing the school district and local government to publicly reassess policies that had previously prioritized reputation and academic prestige over openly. Confronting behavioral warning signs, leading to emergency board meetings and policy reforms that redistributed authority toward multidisciplinary safety teams involving counselors, psychologists, and law enforcement liaisons working together rather than in isolated administrative silos. While weeks later, the injured student survived and began recovery, his resilience becoming a symbol of unity for classmates who organized vigils, scholarship funds, and peer support initiatives, marking a transformation in school culture that replaced silent competition with collective vigilance and compassion. And as the court proceedings advanced, prosecutors presented evidence, demonstrating accountability and ensuring legal consequences for the suspect, offering families a sense that justice was being served through due process rather than vengeance, leaving the community to confront the haunting truth that safety is not preserved by reputation, denial, or assumption, but by collective awareness, early intervention, and the courage to take warning signs seriously. A life lesson etched permanently into the halls of Wootton High School, reminding students, parents, and educators alike that protecting one another requires constant attention, shared responsibility, and the willingness to act before silence becomes tragedy. In the weeks following the shooting at Wootton High School, the building reopened under heightened security, metal detectors installed at every entrance, and uniformed officers stationed in hallways that once echoed with casual laughter, while students returned, carrying invisible weight, glancing nervously at lockers and stairwells that had become reminders of how quickly normal life could fracture. As counselors rotated through classrooms encouraging open discussion, yet many students remained silent, struggling privately with fear and guilt, especially those who had known both the victim and the accused, while investigators deepened their examination into the suspect's background, uncovering a trail of overlooked red flags buried in disciplinary files, counseling notes, and digital communications that painted a far more complex portrait than initial reports suggested, revealing that the accused student had been involved in repeated conflicts, online harassment incidents, and alarming creative writing assignments that referenced violence, submissions that had been flagged by teachers but categorized as artistic expression rather than psychological distress, creating a second wave of dramatic irony as staff members who once defended academic freedom now questioned whether their interpretations had allowed warning signs to remain unchallenged, while detectives simultaneously uncovered that the wounded student had quietly reported receiving anonymous threatening messages weeks before the shooting, reports that were logged but never escalated due to lack of identifiable suspects, intensifying community anger as parents demanded transparency during tense school board hearings where administrators attempted to defend their protocols only to face mounting evidence that communication gaps between departments allowed crucial information to remain compartmentalized, marking a powerful shift in authority as external safety consultants and state education officials began auditing the district's entire threat assessment infrastructure, effectively placing long-standing leadership under external oversight for the first time in the school's history. while students themselves began organizing peer safety coalitions, demonstrating a generational shift in influence as teenagers demanded roles in shaping the very policies designed to protect them. And amid this transformation, the surviving victim returned home from the hospital to emotional support from classmates, his recovery symbolizing resilience, yet also reopening emotional wounds during his initial interview with investigators, where he revealed he had recognized the suspect moments before the shooting and believed there had been a brief hesitation, a flicker of doubt that suggested the act was not purely premeditated but driven by escalating emotional collapse, prompting detectives to re-evaluate the suspect's mental state and examine whether outside influences or undisclosed conflicts contributed to the event, while forensic analysis of the suspect's confiscated phone uncovered encrypted conversations with an unidentified online contact who appeared to encourage isolation, resentment toward peers, and detailed discussions about perceived injustice within the school hierarchy, shifting the investigation toward a disturbing possibility that the shooting may not have been entirely self-directed. As digital analysts worked to trace the anonymous communicator whose messages suggested knowledge of school security procedures and student schedules, triggering federal interest and expanding the case beyond local jurisdiction, while court proceedings against the suspect began drawing national attention, with prosecutors presenting overwhelming physical evidence, while defense attorneys introduced arguments regarding psychological manipulation and external coercion, intensifying public division over responsibility and punishment as journalists uncovered that the anonymous contact account had abruptly deleted itself hours after the shooting, leaving behind fragmented digital footprints that suggested deliberate erasure rather than casual disappearance. And as investigators reconstructed the final timeline, they discovered the suspect had received one last message minutes before entering the hallway, a message that remained partially corrupted but contained a chilling phrase implying the event would change everything, leaving detectives racing to recover the missing data while the community believed the case was nearing closure, unaware that the deeper truth behind the shooting and the identity of the unseen influence possibly orchestrating the tragedy was only beginning to surface, setting the stage for revelations that could redefine guilt, accountability, and justice entirely, in ways no one at Wootton High School was prepared to face.